My name's Murray Clark, and I'm the current board chair of Gypsy, and wasn't that a great video? Some old pictures that bring back memories. Welcome again to this 50th anniversary celebration of Gypsy. 50 years of resolute and often quiet work of Gypsy for this great city of ours. The video certainly touched on some of the initiatives Gypsy has been involved in this city in the past, but there have been so many more meaningful initiatives, projects, task force, working groups, and the like that have been and continue to be the work of Gypsy. The video you've seen will be, I'm told, by staff, will be on Gypsy's website tomorrow, so we invite you to take another look. Let me start by thanking our generous sponsors this evening, our signature sponsors, Ice Miller and Yvonne Shaheen. Yvonne, the 1999 Whistler Award winner. Thank you for our signature sponsors. And our premier sponsors, American Structure Point, Faegre Baker Daniels, IUPUI, JP Morgan Chase, and McAllister Machinery. Thank you all to those sponsors. Now, I have a list of elected officials, and I suspect I've missed somebody, so I'll apologize in advance. When I call your name, I would ask you to stand up, and I'd ask you to hold your applause until we complete the introductions. First, you've already heard from Congressman Susan Brooks with our pledge. Thank you, Congresswoman Brooks, for being here. Congressman Todd Young here, who's a candidate for United States Senate as well. Thank you, Congressman. Congressman Rakita had mentioned he might be able to make it here. I don't see him here. If he is, please stand up. Senator Coates is represented by City County Councilor Ginny Kane. I know Ginny's here. Senator Donnelly is also represented by Brandon Herget. Speaker Brian Bosma is here as well. We thank you, Speaker. Deputy Mayor Adam Collins is here, I believe. Representative Greg Porter. Greg, are you here? We hope you are. 5 City County Council people, Ginny Kane, as I mentioned, Ben Hunter, Jeff Miller, Leroy Robertson, and Jefferson Shreve. Superior Court Judge Clayton Graham, Washington Township Trustee Frank Short, IPS School Board members Mike O'Connor and Mary Ann Sullivan. Will you join me in thanking them for all they do for the city? I also want to make mention that we have both Indianapolis mayoral candidates have joined us this evening, Chuck Brewer and Joe Hogsett. We thank you for attending. We wish you Godspeed, both of you. Tonight is such a special night for so many reasons. Not only are we honored to have our 5 Unigov mayors here with us, but we're so pleased to be able to honor former mayor, Indianapolis Mayor John Barton, who helped begin Gypsy 50 years ago. For those of you who don't know Mayor Barton, he had a lifetime of public service. The 43rd mayor of Indianapolis from 1963 to 1967, he also served as superintendent of the Indiana State Police and for more than 2 decades on the Indiana Parole Board. Mayor Barton passed away in 2004 at the age of 97. His daughter, Peggy Weaver, has traveled from Texas to be here with us tonight. Peggy, would you please stand? We are so thankful for the hard work of your father. So thankful for all your father did for the city and your willingness to join us tonight. Thanks, Peggy. Another very important person in the creation of and launch of Gypsy was its first executive director, John Walls. John was devoted to Gypsy, certainly. He wrote a wonderful narrative of Gypsy's history in 1995 and then updated it about 6 years ago. Both of these documents are a great read and available on the Gypsy website as well. Though John, too, has passed away, his daughter, Kathy Shorter, is here tonight. Kathy, we thank you for your father's service to our city and also for yours that continues today with your work on behalf of our neighborhoods. Kathy, thank you. So many people have contributed to the success of Gypsy and its projects over the years. We're pleased to have so many of them with us tonight, several traveling great distances to be here. We attempted to list the names of previous board chairs and executive directors in the program this evening, and if we missed any, I apologize. But if you served in one of these capacities for Gypsy over the years, would you please stand so that we can thank you for your service? In 1981, Indianapolis lost altogether too early a community leader by the name of Charles Chuck Whistler. He selflessly gave his time and extraordinary talents to the Indianapolis community without asking for power or position in return. At the time of his death, he was the chair of the Gypsy Urban Growth and Revitalization Task Force and also of the White River State Park Citizens Advisory Committee. After his death, Gypsy created the Whistler Award, given annually to those who serve our community at an extraordinary level. We're pleased to have so many of the past Whistler Award honorees with us this evening. You can find a full listing of them inside the back of your program. But would all previous Whistler Award recipients please stand so we can honor you again? I hope you'll save the date for November 10th when Gypsy will honor its latest Whistler recipient, Tom King, at a breakfast at Ivy Tech Culinary Center at 28th and Meridian. This is a year in which several organizations are celebrating significant anniversaries. Tonight we celebrate 50 years with Gypsy, but we also share this anniversary with the Indianapolis Urban League, who is celebrating its 50th anniversary next month. This year, the Indianapolis Chamber of Commerce celebrates 125 years and will mark the milestone in December at a special event. And finally, we also celebrate the work of a critical committee of Gypsy, the Race and Cultural Relations Leadership Network, which was created 20 years ago. The work of the network has been usually quiet, but so important to our city over the years, including this year, when unfortunately communities across the country have experienced significant racial challenges. The network is chaired by Tim Nation of the Peace Learning Center and Gloria King from Eskenazi Health, and its director is Toby Miller. Will the three of you and all other members of this committee, past and present, please stand so that we may show our gratitude for your great work. Okay, well now it's time for the meat of the program. It's truly my honor to have these five extraordinary men who so successfully shaped our city over the last 50 years with us tonight. For somebody like me that grew up in Indianapolis, who loves this city, who had the great fortune, really almost dumb luck, of observing so many remarkable leaders in this community, and who cut his teeth on politics a few years back in this city, tonight is like going to a Hall of Fame dinner. So please join me welcoming our five Unigov mayors and Jim Shella, who will moderate a discussion with them. Jim, mayors.
Yep. Good evening. How's everybody? Oh, get a little feedback. These guys don't need an introduction, but just because I feel compelled to do so, I'm going to run down the list. The first mayor under Unigov, Richard Lugar, who, as you all know, is a Republican. The longest serving mayor of Indianapolis, Bill Hudnut, also a Republican. Hey. Steve Goldsmith, also a Republican. Bart Peterson, who is the only Democrat here on stage. And finally, the current mayor, Greg Ballard. Hey. I'll throw this out to the group. Who is the best mayor? Get a load of that, politicians.
I'll vote for
Speechless.
Lugar.
I think Senator Lugar set the tone, no question. I do.
All right, here's one I know you'll answer. How did you make use of Gypsy? This is, it's like figure skating. We had a compulsory here we got to do, and then we'll get into the freestyle.
We ought to go down the line.
Yeah, we'll go down the line on this one. How did you make use of Gypsy, and what did it mean to your administration?
Very fortunately, John Walls had been brought to Indianapolis by Mayor Barton from Pittsburgh. And when I was elected mayor, immediately I simply asked John to come into the mayor's office, really, as almost deputy mayor. So we incorporated Gypsy in the mayor's office right away. And it was a great move because he was a tremendous guy who brought all of the community aspects that he'd been working on for a couple of years.
Mayor Hudnut.
Well, let me just say, first of all, it's nice to be here. I'm very happy to be the thorn among all these great roses. And I inherited the Progress Committee from Dick and tried to broaden out the base a little bit, got some representation from the labor unions and the neighborhood organizations and even Democrats and Republicans, although we have one rule, and that was never talk politics, because it was a nonpartisan group. And we were privileged to have a number of great leaders from the business community. And during the course of the 16 years I was mayor, I used it a lot. And it came up with some very good programs, some of which are mentioned in this program tonight. And it was a very satisfying experience to have that chance to not only visualize, but also embrace the public partnership, which is great here in Indianapolis and the key to a lot of our growth.
Mayor Goldsmith.
I think Gypsy was the strongest for me when there was an important issue that cut across racial issues, cultural issues, demographic issues. So if you wanted to address police community relations, visioning for Indianapolis, or even the creation of a new structure like eventually IDI. So the strength of Gypsy, I think, as Mayor Bill mentioned, was its representation, right? A broad array of the community that could bring consensus around difficult issues.
Mayor Peters.
I remember not long after I took office, there was a young boy, about 9 years old, an African-American boy, who was run over by a car in a hit-and-run accident in an apartment complex on the west side. And the driver was a Latino man. There were a lot of witnesses. And he drove off and left the scene and was actually never apprehended, I don't believe. And at that time, it was sort of the front edge of a pretty significant immigration growth in Indianapolis, predominantly, but not exclusively, with new Latino residents. And we had a lot of concern that this incident, this tragic accident, might spark bad feelings between the communities, and this was one of those things that felt a little bit like a lit fuse for a moment. And we immediately convened the Race Relations Leadership Network of Gypsy. And within a few hours after this tragic accident, we were out at the apartment complex on the west side, all of us together, a totally diverse group of people, saying how we were going to use this tragedy as a way to strengthen relations between different ethnic groups in our community, not let it tear us down. And I think that's been the Indianapolis way, and I think Gypsy has really led in us being at the forefront of strong community relations across the board in Indianapolis.
Mayor Ballard.
Yeah, that continues to this day, actually. I used them a lot for advocacy and support. Certainly they were critical for Eskenazi Hospital being built. I think that cut across so many different demographics, and they were terrific in that. But also, you know, they did a lot of study for us. We put them to work a little bit, and even though the Criminal Justice Center didn't eventually go through, they actually worked for almost 2 years to get to a feasible package that would work well into the future. And Gypsy and a lot of those very smart people in that organization did tremendous work on that for a long time.
This is a question that maybe Mayor Ballard you don't feel the need to answer necessarily, but certainly you can if you'd like. How does the Indianapolis of today compare with the vision you had for the city as mayor? Mayor Hudnut, let's start with you.
Well, I thought you were going to ask that to Ballard. I'll get my mind racing and say Indianapolis has grown. Indianapolis is sensitive to these issues that we're talking about of equal opportunity and equal rights, civil rights, peaceful resistance to Indianapolis desegregation, which was the pride group that the Progress Committee helped us form at the time that we were ordered to do some court busing or some cross-county busing.
You always said when you were mayor that you can't be a suburb of nothing. And I guess what's changed most since you became mayor is downtown.
Well, it certainly has, and I'm very grateful for the opportunities we had to help build the downtown, building on my predecessor's wonderful foundations that he laid, namely the Progress Committee and UNIGOV. And we couldn't have done a lot that we did without Dick's foresight there, and I'll always be grateful to him for that. I think that the way in which the city has progressed is a testimony to the fact that we have had a succession of fine people in the mayor's office who have made strong commitments to the city and helped it along. I was pleased to help it along for a while, but 16 years is up, and then Mr. Goldsmith takes over, and then Mr. Peterson, then Mr. Ballard, and we all built on each other's shoulders, if you pardon the mixed metaphor.
Senator Lugar, did you envision Indianapolis as it is today?
I hope that it would be something like what we see today, but clearly at the time that I was running for mayor, I was struck by the fact that Mayor Kavanaugh in Detroit, a city of 1.6 million, was suffering through a horrible racial struggle there, which really set back Detroit in such a way that it really never recovered. About 700,000 people live there now. I was struck by the fact that if we did not grow, if there was not the possibility of Indianapolis becoming a major city, then the idea that John Gunther said in his travel logs, Indiana no place, was going to be our situation. People were not coming here. Now, I think, you know, the thing that has enlisted my support so much is the Visit Indy group. From the time I was mayor, the last hotel was being torn down that year. It was 40 years ago, and Visit Indy celebrated 40 years, which they pointed out we now have $4.5 billion worth of income coming from tourism and hotels. 75,000 jobs, principally in the downtown area, although not entirely there. That's a lot of people coming into Indianapolis, plus all of the wealth and the growth that is involved in that situation, plus the sports complexes that are part of this picture, and the convention center as it's grown to accommodate all of this. This is a remarkable city. And it's one that, get back to my original point, did take racial relations very seriously from the very beginning. This was critical, that we have at least peace and justice and progress for all of us. And when you have that many new jobs and that much new income and you have an inner city that's that vital, that has pretty good prospects.
Mayor Goldsmith, when you were in office, there was a lot of talk about the big holes downtown.
What?
Not by me. I didn't notice those.
Yeah, there's a mall there and a few things around it. I mean, you had to be concerned about where things were heading.
Well, I think if you look at the story, right, if you come from the left to the right, what we've, I think, regularly seen is high aspirations for what the city can be by each mayor, right? And then a series of concrete projects that catalyze that vision, right? And so as Bill mentioned, as Dick created Unigov and energized the IUPUI campus and thought about the other elements. It was really not an applause line, really. Anyway, so then when I took over, we basically mapped all of those assets and figured out kind of how they could fit together and what else needed to be built and where the convention center needed to be expanded and where the Pacers should play basketball. And we had the holes, but there was kind of good news and bad news. The good news is that Bill had a hugely aspirational vision for what Indianapolis could become, right? And there were challenges in executing that. Obviously, the economy was a challenge in executing it. But I mean, after we examined it, we decided that we would actually build on that vision, double down the bets on that vision, and look what's happened, right? So I think it's a testimony to the vision of those who preceded me, and hopefully kind of what we left to Bart.
Yeah, any thoughts, Bart?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The opportunity to build on what we had, what I inherited when I took office. I said this repeatedly throughout my campaign. This is a great city, and our job is to make it even better. And I think that's what's continued to happen throughout these 5 administrations. But I will say, one of the things that I had hoped is a couple things I had hoped is that we would be able to really invigorate the arts in Indianapolis and build on our incredible sports legacy, the redevelopment of downtown, the kind of the rebirth of the spirit of the city that had occurred under these 3 leaders, and broaden that out to include a stronger arts community and also a more diverse population, which was happening organically anyway. I mean, there was a significant migration of people of many, many different nationalities into Indianapolis, starting probably late in your administration, Steve, and then into mine. And one of the things I'm most pleased to see in the 8 years since I've left office is the emphasis, Greg, that you've placed on the diversity of our population, being a welcoming city, being a city that says immigration, yes, more. We're an international city in spirit and in the way we conduct ourselves. So it is, I think we can be very proud as we look on the 45 years or so, 50 years, I guess, in Gypsy terms, of, as you said, Steve, how we're never done. So it's going to be up to the next mayor then to take what they find and make it better. And if we have one mayoral administration where we stagnate or don't move up, I'll tell you the competition will eat our lunch because it's moving fast out there.
I get a comment? Thank you.
If you care, if you care.
No.
I know, when he talks about moving forward, I mean, I know you're concerned about whether the state legislature is in step with you.
Well, I look at it in a certain way, and because I've been so lucky, because these 4 men preceded me, and we're kind of at a certain point. Fundamentals are always a struggle. I think we all know that, infrastructure, policing, all that stuff. That stuff is there every day. No matter what you do. But we've been able to get to a certain point, and Bart mentioned there's a couple things. One is the international piece. This is a global economy. You failing to realize it means you're going to fail in it. And I've been trying to push that pretty hard. I got my own, to be frank, a lot of my own compadres said, don't do that. Mayors don't do that sort of thing. And I said, no, we have to do that. It's important to the future of the city. You have to be seen as a global player, as a city. No question about that. And the other piece is, I think we need to see ourselves as cutting edge and innovative. I always tell people pretty candidly that my main job has always been to attract talent, and everything I do is to attract talent. in the city, because the cities that do that is going to win. And if you're not innovative and you're not pushing forward and cutting edge, you're not going to be that globally competitive city. And I think, I know that hurts us on the, because we're the humble place, but we have to understand that if we're not going to position ourselves in the future like that, we're going to be in trouble.
All right, so Bart talked about being a welcoming city. You talked about attracting talent. Those are all arguments that we heard in opposition to RFRA. How much has RFRA hurt the city's brand?
Well, all 5 mayors signed a letter saying that was exactly the wrong way to go on that, and I'm really happy. I give Mayor Hudnut a lot of credit because he kind of shepherded that through. There's work to be done, no question about that. And after everything we've been trying to do for the last 50 years and to position ourselves a certain way, to have that tagline on us was extremely hurtful. And not everybody saw it, but there was an unbelievable number of people working overtime and still are to overcome that. And we want to make sure that we are seen as welcoming and inclusive as a city. Again, if you're not going to be competitive. I mean, that's just the way the world is going right now, and we have to be seen that way.
Jim, I just want to say, with regard to the letter, Bill did start that, and it took about 4 hours from the time he sent an email out until all 5 of us had affixed our signatures to that letter. And it actually... It actually would have only taken an hour, except that I was responsible for the 3-hour delay, because as everybody, I have some wonderful people who are on my staff who are here, know that I cannot put my name on something without editing it. And
we noticed that.
I made it worse. But I couldn't leave it alone. But thanks to Bill and thanks to all of you for that. I think our image took a real blow. And I don't think we should sugarcoat this. We've got to do something about this. We have to take affirmative steps to try to reverse the smudge on our reputation that this incident created. And we have an opportunity with the legislative session that's coming up to do that. And I think we absolutely have to take advantage
There you go. I'll say, go ahead, Dick.
No, I was going to say,
I always yield to my elders.
Among those that were really on the firing line, Bart was clearly one of them. Mark Miles, who is here tonight, Jim Morris, other friends of all of ours, immediately rose to the occasion. These are citizens who have lived through all of what we're talking about tonight. I recall back when the 3rd year I was mayor, President Nixon decided to come to Indianapolis, the first trip he'd taken out because he was worried about Vietnam protests.
You became known as Richard Nixon's favorite mayor.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
I think that I was. As a matter of fact. But in any event, President Nixon had 20,000 people out there in front of the city-county building. And he was so relieved on going up to the 25th floor. While he was on the elevator, he said, "Lugar, I want you and Moynihan to go to Brussels, represent the cities of America there at NATO." And so I went over with Pat Moynihan to Brussels, and not lacking nerve about this, I invited all the mayors of the world to come to Indianapolis for the first international conference on cities. And about 50 did. And we had 400 high school students singing Ode to Joy on the Monument Circle steps there. But most importantly, very distinct communities, Serbs, Croats, others in Indianapolis, took the occasion to come out of the shell. They invited the mayors from their region to have dinner or lunch or what have you. In other words, we really celebrated being an international city. And thank goodness that trend has continued on and on and on as we've discovered more people. And I salute Mayor Ballard, Mayor Peters, and Bart Peterson for accentuating that. This is a time when we've got to say that, because right now on the political trail, people are railing against immigration everybody out, 11 million people out of here and all the rest of it. Indianapolis doesn't stand for that. We are a city that, as a matter of fact, is international, have grown because we are, have enriched our situation, have gained a reputation.
I got to say this about that. 3 of us live outside the city now. We all love the city, but we don't really live here every day. So we get a little bit different perspective. And I am aware of the unfortunate, the word smudge was used somewhere, smudge on the reputation of the city and the state as a result of what you referenced with regard to the Religious Freedom Act. And I don't think that the problem is going to be solved, frankly, until we get gender identity and sexual preference in the state law. I know there are religious conservatives who feel very strongly the other way, but they're not the only religious people in the city. And there are a lot of others who feel differently, me being one, and I'll be glad to argue the Bible with any of those people.
I've studied it a little.
I'm going back a few years because, as you may know, I was a preacher before I fell from grace and went into politics. Three things I think about the RFRA thing. And Brian Bosma, I know you're here, but I've got to say this anyway, that first of all, I've already mentioned what I wanted to say about getting that into the state law. But secondly, the economic development impact, negative impact of what happened is tremendous. I don't think many of the figures are public, and yet it's hurt attracting new business to the city. It's hurt attract new talent, which Greg was talking about. It's hurt attracting college students to the city and the state. We don't want to come there because they discriminate. That's the idea. And thirdly, it's sort of, in my opinion, hurt the tourism and convention business, even though I don't know what the figures are, but we won't know until like 3 or 4 years from now because the decisions were made in many instances while RFRA was hot. And we don't want to go to Indiana. It's a discriminatory state. And that's got to be changed. And the only way to change it is to change the state law.
All right, we've had far too much agreement here so far. What was the biggest problem your predecessor left for you to solve?
How much time do we have? Just kidding.
Mayor Ballard, you wanted to go first on this.
Yeah. Let's go backwards on this one.
Yeah. We talked about this off stage. My predecessor left me a plan for a cricket field. See, he did. He did. And I am proud to tell him right now that this month we are having our second world-class cricket event there. We are. And not to mention multiple regional hurling tournaments and other sporting events out there on a routine basis. Just so you know.
Does that mean he's raising crickets that chirp?
I want to ask Greg if he knows how to score cricket.
Actually, I don't.
You know, I'm not going to fall for the bait, but in all seriousness, I think it's probably true in any executive job at any level. You get into office and you're just convinced that there are all kinds of things that you can fix and do better and whatnot, and of course that you're a different group of people with new blood and you can do a lot of things. But the more time goes on, the more you respect your predecessor and all the challenges they faced and what they had to overcome, and it's probably why there's a bond among all of us, because you realize that we all face the same problems. There were different eras that we served in, but fundamentally you know, this is tough stuff, and you really understand that there are no easy answers, and you realize, what you really realize is how much you were left, not how much you were left without when you took the job.
But that wasn't the question.
But he did a really good job with it, didn't he?
Yeah, sounds like a politician.
That's the question I choose to answer. Jim.
You are a true politician.
Yeah. Mayor Goldsmith, care to answer?
I'm really glad he didn't answer the question. Really.
I'm not listening, Steve.
Well, I would, I'm not going to answer the question either. But I'll answer it kind of half seriously in the following way, right? So Indianapolis had a huge amount of momentum when I was elected, right? Dick to Bill to me. And as Bart said, you want to, I mean, you run for this office because you actually think you can contribute something, right? So you don't want to accept the status quo. And Indianapolis had these huge visions about what it could become. Right? And you asked me about the holes in the mall, right? Well, they're just an example. If you have a really big vision, you have to keep working to get there. So, I mean, I think probably the most difficult thing is you know, Bill had been there for 16 years. He was the face of Indianapolis. He led Indianapolis. He had a vision for Indianapolis. He had an aspiration for Indianapolis. And I followed. So how to execute on that vision and make it better was the biggest challenge I had, right? And it was a result of, I think, the momentum we had. And I tell a lot of people, and I'm sure we all do, right, that you're much more likely to be a successful mayor if you follow a successful mayor, and I had that good fortune.
Hey, that's very nice. Well, I feel the same way. I did not inherit a single problem from Dick Lugar.
Not one.
I can't think of any. I mean, he laid the foundations for the modern Indianapolis, and we all built on that. And I can't think of anything. I'm sorry, but I can't answer the question. I thought he did a terrific job. I was so honored to follow him. I got beaten in 1974 for re-election to Congress by my dear friend Andy Jacob. And I went to Dick and said, "Are you going to run again?" He said, "No, I don't think I will. May I?" He said, "Yes." He said, "You get 2 perks, tickets and a car." Remember that?
That's right.
And I'm not even sure we get the tickets now, ethics being what they are. Right? I got so cross at certain members of the media when they'd come up to read after the Hoosier Dome was built, and they'd come poking into municipal suite and say, "Who's here? Are you paying off political debts with these tickets that you get?" Blah, 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 blah. It was, I thought, not a nice cut. But Dick started it all. I mean, didn't you build, you built Market Square Arena.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah.
And we had the NCAA finals there, and I remember sitting up there for the Louisville game with Doc Bowen and a couple of others.
Get some tickets. Right?
I got some tickets. But bless Dick's heart, I cannot think of a single problem. I was just proud to be in the office that he had held. And when people said, "You're going to have a tough time filling Lugar's shoes," I said, "Well, that may be true, but I'm not going to try to fill his shoes. I'm going to fill my own shoes."
There you go. Any thoughts?
Well, let me just thank Bill for what a wonderful tribute. I think what I need to point out is when Bill came to me and asked whether I was going to run again, I pointed out that there were term limits in those days.
Oh. I've forgotten that.
That would be before the HUD Not Forever law.
Well, Bill,
I noticed that problem myself.
Bill had the good sense to get the law changed.
Not me, Dave Frick and some of those guys did it. I had nothing to do with it.
But in terms of my predecessor, really, I'm indebted to him for having Frank McKinney, who really is so important in the history of Gypsy. Frank McKinney had everything. As John Walls pointed out in that remarkable essay, he was chairman of the National Democratic committee, most prominent banker. But he also said aloud, as an incoming official with the Progress Committee and as a friend of the mayor, that we've got to do better. Enough of this broadcasting that we're the best and all of this sort of hoopla. We're not the best. As a matter of fact, he said, in the next 5 years, we've got to replace a whole lot of what hasn't happened in the last 20. Now, that's a pretty severe comment to make to your best friend as mayor, but I believe that was the case. I think there was momentum there that could be picked up. I appreciated Frank McKinney really carrying the ball so that I had some room to begin the thoughts with regard to touring the state, visiting with each of the state legislators, trying to interest them in Indianapolis, because only they could change our laws and make UNIGOV possible. And it was a situation in which we paid tribute to Chuck Wister tonight. Chuck,
Yep.
Lou Bose really did the drafting. We met out at Arth and John Burkhart's home. It was a wonderful time in which people were inspired to think about a greater Indianapolis. And it really came from the impetus of John Barton and his friendship with Frank McKinney and his commencing of this Gypsy organization we celebrate tonight.
Let's talk a little bit about leadership, if we can, because I know all of you dealt with crises at one time or another. Senator Lugar, you dealt with Bobby Kennedy coming to town on the night that Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. You dealt with the blizzard of '78. I know I saw Mayor Peterson surveying tornado damage. What's the most important quality for a leader at a time of crisis?
Who?
Anybody can go first.
It goes back to my Marine Corps days, obviously, but it's situational awareness. You got to know where you are. You got to know what the moment is. And there's a time to stand up and be visible and say what needs to be said, and there's a time to not do that. And you have to know what those moments are.
You know, I was in office when 9/11 happened, and we were just reflecting on that a little bit earlier this evening. And I remember thinking at that moment that I had a special responsibility. I didn't, I like everybody else, I had to learn what had actually happened. I had to try to understand it and comprehend it. But at that time, everybody else was going through the same thing. And what I knew was that people needed to see me, because I was the mayor, out there talking to them. Period. That the most important thing was not to have answers, but to be visible and to tell them we were at work and that everything was going to be okay. That, and you don't obviously know for sure whether everything's going to be okay, but I think you have to project a very strong image that somebody is in charge, that they're not panicked, and that they're going to do the best that they can possibly do to try to help you all through this. And I think those, it does seem to happen to almost everybody where you get thrust into that kind of a situation, and it's one of the great things about the job, right? There's a lot of challenges to the job, but the opportunity to step up in a time like that is very important. And I think I can think of examples of everybody up here when they had the chance to do that and did, and it helps people through. And that's really what you're trying to do, is get through that initial period.
Well, I think you can think about leadership. I obviously totally agree with the two previous comments, but you can think about leadership in kind of three different ways, right? So one is that you have to do your day-to-day job effectively so people have confidence that the city's leadership knows what they're doing, right? If you can't fill the potholes and you can't pick up the snow and you can't do the basics, then people don't have confidence. So one aspect of leadership is to develop the political capital, not Republican, Democrat, but the political capital that people have confidence in. Another aspect of leadership, right, is the aspect that Bart mentioned, which is that, your job as a mayor, since there's only one mayor at a time, right, it's an expression of the democratic will, is to give people in your community a confidence that tomorrow will be better than yesterday, right? And so in a moment of crisis, that quiet confidence and leadership, the expression that tomorrow will be better. And then thirdly, that confidence in that tomorrow being better is leadership in the sense that, look, I'm going to listen to my community, but I'm going to be out there and kind of setting a target for what the city can become, right? The definition of leadership is not just about managing calamity, it's about managing the future. So if you put all those together, it's, confidence developing in the community about what you can produce, confidence in the moment of the kind of crisis, and confidence that if this is our aspiration and you're saying it, that there's some belief that we can actually get there. Those things come together as the leadership characteristics of all four men to my right and to left.
Boy, that's terrific.
That's the nicest thing you've said to me. I'm really
Now I realize why your IQ is much higher than mine. Well, I'll do a little different take on it and talk about qualities of leadership. And I think the first one has to be, if you're the mayor, love of people, embracing the community, not worrying about partisanship. I don't agree with to the victor belongs the spoils. You've got to be inclusive. And that's what love is all about, I think, in a professional kind of way. Secondly, I think you've got to have a vision. We had some retreats early on, and people like Dave Frick, Jim Morris were part of that, and others. And at those retreats, which were held in Boston and down in Brown County, we said, what do we want the city to be? We don't want it to be a city that you fly over to get somewhere else. We want it to be a city that people know about. That's a major league city. And we don't want it to be called Naptown. I remember once I was with Ray Benison, who was the head of the Convention Visitor Bureau here for a while. We were out in San Francisco hustling some convention business. Guy got on the elevator with Ray. Some lady walked on the elevator. Everybody knows each other in the convention planning business. And we're going down the elevator, and Ray says, or she says to Ray, I haven't seen you since you left Kansas City. Where are you now? He said, well, I'm the president of the Indianapolis Convention and Visitors Bureau. She said, oh my God, that place is nothing but a cemetery with lights. And Ray turned to me and said, I'd like you to meet the mayor of Indianapolis. But the vision to change our image, to use, some people have called it leveraging amenity infrastructure, to use sports as an economic development tool, I think was a big part of the vision that we had, as well as the idea that you can't be a suburb of nothing. You've got to have a strong downtown. And now it's turning around, and now you need a strong downtown in order to have good neighborhoods. But the idea that we have to fill in the hole. No, I'm not saying that disrespectfully, because you did a lot to fill up the hole. But we still didn't want Indianapolis to be a 9-to-5 downtown. Mm-hmm. So that was part of the vision, to promote downtown revitalization without discouraging vitalization out in the suburbs. The third thing you need is the courage to stand up for what you believe in and take a strong stand, whether it has to do with equal opportunity. We formed the Equal Opportunity Office when I was mayor, and we did the first AIDS ordinance and stuff like that. Equality of opportunity, respect for people, and so forth, Jim. And yet, as that evolved, it, for me, became a time when I was criticized, probably by some very justifiably, for putting the bricks on the circle. And one of the old pundits in town said, you'll never be reelected to anything if you do that. And then when the Dome Stadium was built, the same guy says to me, you're wasting money again. You'll never be elected for anything if you build that stadium.
That newspaper went out of business, right?
It was a newspaper guy, that's right. So what I'm saying is, you've got to have the love of people, the creativity of vision, and finally the courage of your commitments to follow through on what you believe in, to be a leader.
Well done.
Well, sometimes I think you just need some good fortune. I remember vividly that it was April 4th, 1968. I've been mayor a little over 3 months. It was my birthday, and I was looking forward to celebrating with the family. I got word that Robert Kennedy, who had been campaigning in Indiana, was planning to come to 17th and Broadway after dark to campaign that night, deliberately, in a neighborhood that at the time was a dangerous neighborhood for the people that were living there, quite apart from everybody else. I pled with the Kennedy campaign not to do that, but nevertheless, they were determined to do so. So I went to the Murat Hotel, where I knew the Kennedys were going to finally end up. As a matter of fact, had dinner with the Shortreach High School basketball team that had been runner-up. Shortreach High School was 100% Caucasian when I attended there. It was now about 95% African-American. The team was African-American. We were having a good visit when word came from Lieutenant Wolsifer, my police aide, that Robert Kennedy Martin Luther King had been assassinated. And oh my. So the Murat Hotel was not far from 17th and Broadway, and that was one reason for being there to begin with, to pull together the police department, to try to pull together all the law enforcement we could to at least surround the area, and really to pray for circumstances to work out. Robert Kennedy gave, of course, a magnificent speech, which has been replayed many, many times. But I had the good fortune that in the crowd there were so-called black activists. Two of them, I'll name by name, Snooky Hendricks and Ben Bell. They had been active in my campaign. They had taken me down, as a matter of fact, after the campaign, to a precinct on the near north side, and pointed out that in that particular precinct, that I had gotten no votes at all. And I said, well, how is that the case? He said, well, it was a big vote, but we voted for everybody, knowing how they really wanted to vote. And somebody took care of it. I think, thank goodness they've counted the votes, and I still don't have to worry about those precincts. But in any event, they told the crowd, this is not the time. This is not the time. So we got the Kennedys safely back into the hotel, and a television station in Indianapolis allowed me to go on the air for about 3 to 5 minutes every night for the better part of 2 or 3 weeks, just to be a reassuring voice. I visited one church basement after another, and sanctuaries on Sunday, and every place I could go to really preach in my own way and what was in my own heart about our city. And we made it. But it was a close call. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned earlier on Mayor Kavanaugh and the terrible problems he had in Detroit, which really led to a downfall. This was just the beginning of the Unigov spirit, the beginning of our rise. And I felt, thank goodness, April the 4th was passed, and we were now into a new chapter.
You later put Snooky Hendricks on your staff, did you not?
I think he was, informally at least.
Yeah. All right.
Well, I'm glad he was your friend.
Snooky was an interesting character, I'll say that. We're running out of time here quickly. I know that both of the candidates for mayor are in the audience, and so I want to give each of you 30 seconds to give your advice to the next mayor. Senator, let's start with you.
I believe that it's important in this particular campaign for the mayor candidates really to have very outspoken, distinct programs, as opposed to simply talking about the fact we need more jobs, we need a stronger economy, we need to think well of each other, and nodding and agreeing with each other that all of these things are the case. In other words, I would like to see the candidates go into the neighborhoods and say, this is what I can do for you, and to get some publicity out of the situation. And I don't mean just the inner city neighborhoods. I mean the suburban neighborhoods, places that are emptying out in Indianapolis, even as we speak, because people are finding better possibilities somewhere else. The fact that we built this population, that we built this wealth and so forth, doesn't mean it stays that way. And there needs to be really a more dynamic aspect to this campaign, in my judgment, in which we really learn the convictions of the candidates.
Mayor Hudnut,
Very good. What was the question?
what's your advice to the next
I
mayor?
know. Just stalling for time to think. Well, my advice, again, is much like what you've heard around the table here tonight. 1, manage the city well, take care of the store. 2, be inclusive, and don't practice, in my opinion, that vindictive form of politics that says to the victor belong the spoils. Because once you're mayor, you have to be mayor for all the people, in my opinion. And that means appointing, for me, it meant appointing maybe a Democrat to office, or African Americans, which were not much visible yet, and that kind of thing. Being inclusive. And the third thing I say is right now, I think it's important to do everything you can to be a very good ambassador for the city and to somehow promote a positive image. There's so much positive here, and we've got to end on a positive note tonight. And I think that the new mayor will be challenged, whichever one it is, to be broad-minded and to think about what's great here and to dwell on that and to lift people's spirits up rather than be negative and complaining and all that sort of stuff. You know, my father used to say, he was a minister. My father used to say every morning when we were on camping trips out west or something, he'd get up out of his tent and say, "Rejoice and be glad, for this is the day which the Lord hath made." Well, I agree with that. And every day when I went downtown, I rejoiced. There's something new to happen, but you've got to love it. You've got to love the city. You've got to love people. You've got to love the job. End of sermon.
Mayor Goldsmith.
And I've been following him for 25 years. Bill and I have been working on some things together, a piece that we wrote for the next mayor that's been published, and that might be a place to begin. Let me just spend 30 seconds in the following way. One, you can't build a great city without a great school system. If the path to a middle-class education is to move out of the city or move out of the center city, we're not going to get there. Two, you know, the good news and bad news for the two mayoral candidates is we've got 40 years of very well-run city government, and there's not any fat left to cut. There's not enough revenue to run the city and do the services it needs to do, and we're going to have to pay attention to that. Third, and maybe for the next time we all get together, you know, I and Dick would probably have a view of this if we had more time, which is we're about back, I would bet, to the place pre-Unigov. If you think about the percentage of people who live in Indianapolis and the wealth in Indianapolis as a percentage of people in the region and wealth in the region, I bet we're almost back to where we were. So the next mayor is going to have a very substantial challenge in trying to create a consensus. This is a regional economy. We're in this together, right? Because there's a lot of poverty in the city and there's a lot of wealth out of the city, and so those will be challenges as well. And then finally, I think probably my advice to the next mayor would be build on the assets, right? I think the common theme tonight is that we have all inherited assets from our predecessors, and we've built on those assets. And this sense of hope and optimism about tomorrow is based on Indianapolis is a great city. It's got terrific people. It's got wonderful assets. We can overcome our challenges. We can be better. I mean, all of us, I think, truly believe that our goal is for the next mayor to be better than we were, using kind of the legacy of the past to build for the future. That'd be my advice to the next mayor.
Very good.
By the way, there's no longer a 30-second limit.
It didn't matter to me anyway. say be a unifier and be ambitious. You know, we've talked about good leadership tonight, but think about the fact that, let's give thanks for the fact that we have avoided bad leadership. Think how many cities have had blustery divider, people who've built their careers on dividing people rather than bringing people together. Think about how many people have, in a very short time, almost single-handedly brought their cities to ruin. It happens in this country. We've had the good sense as an electorate, as a civic body, to avoid that. We can be thankful for good leadership, but you know, for God's sakes, be about unifying people. Be about bringing people together. That's the single most important thing. And then I would say be ambitious. I've had the good fortune in the job I'm in now to travel and see an awful lot of cities across the world, which has been very eye-opening for me. When I was mayor, I used to say a big day of travel was when I got to go to Tipton. Now, you know, it's a little bit, my eyes have been opened a little wider. And I've seen a lot of cities, and I will tell you that we can congratulate ourselves for what we have accomplished, because I grew up in this city. I saw what it was like before Mayor Barton and Mayor Lugar. This was a pretty bleak place, and it's come so far. But I got to tell you, the competition is moving very, very fast. There are great people doing great ideas. Some of them, many of them, in fact, stolen from us right here in Indianapolis. They're making their cities better. If we're going to be competitive, not only in the United States, but as Mayor Ballard says, if we're going to be competitive globally, we've got to be extremely ambitious. You've got 4 years, maybe 8, maybe 16, I don't know. But take what time you have. Go to work on the first day and believe that you've got a very short period of time to accomplish a lot. And if you do that, if you go in with that kind of an attitude, you will accomplish a lot, and we need that.
I'll get you back on schedule on the 30-second thing. Yeah, all that is great. That is absolutely true. Every word of that is true. But my suggestions would be the basics are always challenging. They're always challenging, and you have to keep working at that all the time. Be great people to do those things. But while you're doing that, look into the future, see what the future is going to be, and beat every other city to it. That's what you have to do. You have to see where the world is heading, and that takes a lot of study. And as a city, which is still the most innovative municipality in the world, get your city there before anybody else, because that will make you competitive and that will draw talent into the city. And I think that's absolutely critical. When I became the mayor, I can't tell you how many people, my own people, saying, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. I said, no, that's exactly wrong. We have to look to the future. We have to be competitive. Beat every other city there.
Hey, Jim. Yep. I know you have an agenda neurosis, and you want to get us out of here.
Yes.
But I have a question relevant, I think, for the Gypsy people here. And I like to ask these mayors something, and I've got an answer myself, but I want to hear what they have to say. What do you see as the future of Gypsy? What's its role?
And should an organization as stable and responsible as Gypsy have a better acronym?
Oh, my.
That was not my question, but I'd be interested in answer.
So,
Well, I'll start. If everybody else is reluctant, maybe I shouldn't be horning in like this, but I think they have to think, the word was used once, regionally. And I think they have to help foster the regional dialogue, the regional conversation. I think they have to somehow tie into the Regional Cities Initiative, where Brother Goldsmith is one of the judges. And I hope they get the 7 sorted out, and don't tell any secrets tonight. But I think that there are 381 metropolitan regions in the United States. They generate, according to the statistics I've read, some 92% of the nation's economic activity. And by 2016, it's going to be 95%. And I think it's important to realize that this is a region here, and we have to think and act regionally, and we can no longer be parochial and just think about Marion County. We've got to broaden our horizons, broaden our reach, and recognize that it's regions that are driving the nation's economy more than just plain old cities. That was my answer.
Okay. Anybody care to add on to that?
I agree with that.
In that case, we've.
I've got one comment at the end.
I don't think I'm the moderator anymore.
No,
You go right ahead.
you go ahead, but
No, you go
I know you're going to wrap it up. And all I want to say is that this has been a wonderful experience being with these gentlemen. We haven't been together since down at the University of Indianapolis when we had a similar kind of whatever it is. And I'm grateful for the bonds that exist here that were manifested at the University of Indianapolis a few years ago. And I just cherish my friendship with each one of these 4 people.
Senator.
Let me just speak out of turn a little bit, but I would just say I think I'm deeply moved that Bill Hudnut is with us here this evening.
Oh,
I'm so grateful, so grateful.
thank you. That's kind of you. That's kind of you.
Thank you all for your thoughts tonight and for all you've done for the city. Please say thank you.
Yeah. Woo.
All right.
You okay there?
All right.
Great. Good to see you. We'll be talking on that local organizing for the Congress Mayor. It'll be fun.
Let me know.
It'll be fun.
Yeah,
It'll be a good time.
Good job.
Thanks, Bart.
Thanks.